The challenge of out-of-school children has continued to be an issue of concern in northern Nigeria, especially among the girl child, with majority dropping out of school after completion of junior secondary school education, either for marriage or hawking in the streets. The record of over 700,000 out-of-school children across Yobe State in the last 3 years was associated with ignorance, poverty, as well as the insecurity due to the abduction of boarding female students in some parts of the northeast. But the state government, which believes that establishing senior day girls secondary schools in some major cities would minimize the out-of-school children, especially among the girl child, first visited the Emir of Bade, Abubakar Suleiman, to seek support before inaugurating one of the schools in Gashua.
So today marks another very beautiful success and milestone in the history of education in Yobe State. The senior girls day secondary school is now a reality. You can see that from day one, the principal registered 250 and she gave admission to 800 students. Actually, people of Yobe State have been yearning to see this day.
While some officials appreciate the gesture, the Emir of Badi Emirate is advocating the reintroduction of at least one teachers training college to ensure that only qualified teachers teach at the primary and secondary schools.
Most of us, we had that privilege. Today, it's no more there. So we are appealing to the state government to at least open, even if it's one teachers training college, so that the teacher, we want a teacher to answer the word teacher, not just be a teacher. Most of our teachers now cannot give you a good lesson plan.
Our people of the community are in need of this school, this type of school, and we got it. And we really know that our people are going to perform, our children are going to perform better. My call is to the parents is to bring their children to the school, please.
Although relative peace appears to have returned to the northeast, with the establishment of the 8 schools, the government is optimistic that the problem of out-of-school children due to early marriage would be averted, resulting in increased school enrollment.
And that's what we'll be looking at today, the matter of out-of-school children, Maupe.
Indeed, and we're being joined right now by Mrs. Miriam Oweisu, Special Advisor to the President on Social Investment, and is a national lead of the At-Risk Children Program, the ARC-P. Ma'am, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this matter of out-of-school children is certainly something that, gives a lot of people concern. And people are wondering, are we really taking this matter, are we treating it with the seriousness with which it really deserves to be treated? Well, we continue to hear figures between UNESCO and UNICEF. There is usually a disparity in terms of the number of the out-of-school children that we have. But whether you go with UNESCO's figures or whether you go with UNICEF's figures, those figures are significantly, or you even go with the federal government's figures. I think the federal government puts it at about 7.5 million.
10 million.
You have 10 million for UNICEF, you have 20 million for UNESCO. We're talking about children in the millions not getting an education. Are we treating it with the seriousness it deserves?
Well, the federal government is really trying to address these challenges, but there are very many issues that need to be, considered and addressed. For me personally, it's beyond just an education. These children have been out on the streets without any structures around them. So we need to also be looking at their mental health. We should be looking at skills for those who actually are resistant. Their parents, all of us are the products of the decisions our parents took when we were very young. We didn't have a choice. A lot of their parents, for one reason or the other, cultural reasons or even the high unemployment rate, feel that their children would be better off going into skills rather than going through school, because you go into school and you come out and you don't have a job and you're not even wired to be an entrepreneur. So there are many reasons why, and I think government is trying to see how we can put all of this together, because children that come from homes and are in schools don't have the same challenges as children who have been out there for years, maybe looking for food, being exposed to all kinds of vagaries. I think we should be more holistic about how we address these issues. I agree with you that the numbers are really large, but there are many issues, as I said, and even structural issues. When an elected official gets into government, more interested in seeing what is tangible and pointing at something and saying, this is my legacy. And so if you budget for education, for instance, at the state level, they tend to go for the money tends to go, most of it goes to infrastructure. But there are other issues that are just as critical. And I'm not downplaying infrastructure. We need more infrastructure. But we need to look at the security issues, the poverty issues, the training of teachers. There's so many other issues that you can't point at and say this is the problem, So you can build a really nice school in a poor community and there'll be no teachers. Children would go hawking and to the farm because the parents are poor. So unless we address these other underlying issues that actually compound the problem, we won't have full classrooms. And so in a 4-year term, a lot of public officials don't want to say, we want to see measurement of performance, and 3 years, 4 years is when the results come out.
So the politics of it is not to encourage it. No.
We must find a way of highlighting and making visible these other softer issues. That's what I'm saying.
I recall having a conversation towards the end of last year. The Speaker of the House of Representatives convened some sort of conference. He wanted to talk about tertiary education, and one of the people he invited was the former President Olusegun Obasanjo, who believed that the conversation should have started instead from the basic level. And the way he underscored that is the fact that when children are not educated, that you have deprived that person the ability to be able to contribute meaningfully as a Nigerian to the society. The impact of mentioning something like that, the import of something as basic as education to the contribution of any individual to national life was really, I think really stood out for me in that presentation. And I think that's perhaps one of the reasons why when the APC was coming on board, people were quite optimistic about some of the welfarist program it had. There was a school feeding program. I know it's no longer under your purview now. It's now within the humanitarian ministry. But there have been big questions as to how come it is that, in spite of all of these interventions, there seems to be very little progress recorded vis-a-vis the numbers that we're still recording out of school.
Well, I mentioned those two other issues, but you see, we have a population that's growing much faster than our economy. And we're not actually targeting those issues that, are increasing the numbers. There's so many disparities. And so one of the reasons why we started ARCP is we need to be more strategic about what it is that's causing these numbers. And so it's important for us to get the monitoring in, to get the quantitative factors being given back as feedback. And right now we're under the National Bureau of Statistics, so they can actually analyze the trends and be able to address the issue. I'll give you a small example. I was in one state, I won't say which state, but it's a northern state, and I saw like 13 children playing, and I asked them, why? Why you're old enough to be in school? None of them were beyond 13. And I asked them, why aren't you in school? Oh, we dropped out of school. What are you doing? Oh, I'm pushing a wheelbarrow in the market. Oh, I'm hawking. Oh, I'm different things. And they all have aspirations as young children. I want to own a stall in the market for the one that pushes a wheelbarrow. And why aren't you in school? Oh, we've been asked to pay 80 naira in our schools as a parent's levy or something like that, Now, if we can get that information coming from all the communities, or that being the most prevalent reason why children are dropping out, is something we can tackle the state government on, because these are hidden levies, and they actually impact on the ability of children to engage. The parents said they can't pay that 80 naira. So this is a poverty issue, but it's also an issue that we need to engage the states with and the schools with. And the schools belong to the states. So it's not something the federal government can do, but it can engage the state governor to say, why is this happening? Do you realize that maybe 70% of the children not in school in Sokoto or in Kebbi or in Yobe are not in school because there's this levy?
Yeah, so, sorry, Nyota, while that might be an issue, some people also say it might also be a matter of will. Because you have to ask, for instance, that young boy who is willing a barrow in the market, I mean, how much is he possibly making? That, 80 naira will be an issue that, he couldn't maybe make and say, I'm going back to school. If that was, do people really understand the importance of education?
This takes me back to what I was saying. A lot of parents are not encouraged by what they see, And, without being apologetic, there's a lot of things that have happened over time, especially in the north, and the way the Islamic education and the Malams were they had the rug pulled out from under their feet because they believed that they were doing well. They used numbers in Arabic. They used alphabets in Arabic, and then Western education comes in, and then no, you're wrong. You need to start writing from the other side of the on the right instead of on the left, and you can't even negotiate in the market for your products because you've got it all wrong. So there's a hostility, not necessarily because of the faith, but because they've lost space or productivity. You understand? So there's a resistance to this. And these are the people who hold, they decide for the children whether they go to school or not. We have to find a way of engaging them, getting them to understand that children need to thrive with formal education. And this is why we're doing a lot of foundational literacy in the communities, because they want skills with there's no objection to us teaching how the children can become productive, right? But we tell them the children can't sell their products if they don't understand numbers, if they can't speak, they don't understand how two letters form words. You understand? So they say, okay, we agree for foundational literacy. Now, in the first state we started, we have over 3,600 children who are ready to go back to school because you've introduced them to this thing and they understand and they're stimulated and they want to engage with formal schools. Now, the other side of it, of course, is whether we have the infrastructure, whether we have the teachers, whether we have all of that needs to come together for these children. But it's really critical for us to be more open about engaging these people and ensuring, even incentivizing them, because they say I don't take my son to the farm. He goes to school and he comes out, he doesn't have a job, he doesn't have the farm. I've had that said to me directly in one of the communities. What do you expect me to do? You want me to not have him do the skill in the family when at the end of the day, we're not encouraged by what we see? I mean, I'm sure you meet, even in the profession, journalism, people who have gone through school but can't write.
True.
Sentences, it's very discouraging. So it's an overhaul, but it's not us. It's the education system, which is a different conversation altogether.
I was going to ask you what changed. I mean, there was a time when children went to school, gained the skills, as in they learned to manage the farm, and still went ahead to get some formal education. So what changed?
Well, as I said, it's a whole lot of things. I'm not here to say this is what happened, but I know that the rising unemployment rate has really impacted on the decisions that the parents take on what path the child should. But government needs to intervene because government needs to make them understand that it's not the same thing. We make a lot of, it's very easy to be flippant and say children should, Almajiri, for instance, is wrong, but many of us, elite, send our children to Abuja or to Lagos or to wherever it is that we believe the learning is better, right? This is their own thinking. I believe, including the poverty, of course, that the teaching in Maiduguri, the Malam in Maiduguri, has better teaching methods, he has better knowledge. The only way we can resolve this is if we improve the learning around us. Trying to get the skills in, trying to get the foundational literacy and numeracy in, stimulate the learning, get digital learning, get sports. For a parent that has never been exposed to technology, government needs to introduce technology, because we know children pick up the phone and they're playing away with it. So leaving it to the parent won't say the child should do technology, but because government knows what is available and what is possible, government needs to come in and try and encourage this to happen, and also incentivize the parents and improve the learning.
Before our colleagues in Lagos have some questions, but before we do that, you've talked about incentivizing education, not just about the parents here. Where would that begin? Earlier you mentioned the child who couldn't pay 18 naira to stay in school. Many. Yeah. So that is one issue altogether. The fees, the hidden fees in a space that is supposed to be free. Many of the governments will tell you, I'm not aware of that. How could it be that this is happening? I'm not aware. And then you have the issue of the parents. So what kind of incentives should the parents be should be expecting? And how would that even happen?
So, for instance, in our P, what we do is for girls that hawk, right? The states tell us who is vulnerable, who is out of school in their jurisdiction. And if they give us, they select hawkers as one of their vulnerable groups, we say give us the names of the mothers, the data of the mothers, their phone numbers, their geolocations. And we bring them into workshops in the communities, nutrition, building them up, giving them even poultry. That's in the pipeline. It's almost going to happen, because they're going to be losing money if the girls don't go out to hawk. So they're going to push back. So we want them to understand that if you still push this girl out to hawk and not let her remain in learning hubs, then you're going to be taken off this program. And it's been very, encouraging, the warmth, the way they've embraced, the idea that they can be, there's financial literacy, there's the different packages we're bringing forward, and we're working with agencies in government to try and enhance their knowledge and to create sort of productivity for them, options for productivity. So the Primary Healthcare Development Agency is helping us with health and nutrition training in the communities. We're doing clean cooking, so that they don't they don't waste time and get all the different respiratory issues. I'm sure you know what happens with firewood and deforestation. And we're doing things that will attract the women, making briquettes from rice husks, so that at least they understand that they can actually make money and let the girl remain in a learning hub. Yeah.
Well, I'm a little curious. So I don't think we've spoken enough. We've spoken in general terms about what the problems are.
Yes.
And education. The reason why it's important for basic education to be taken up as a very important discussion. But what I would like to know is what the ARCP is doing about this. What impact would you say that you have had since the establishment of the program?
Well, it's a 2-year, we've been there for 2 years now, and what we're doing actually is training young people who don't have jobs, because that's for us is a resource, who live in the communities, so they speak the language, they understand the culture. We train them across 7 pillars, skills, entrepreneurship. We do a very fast 2-week skills needs assessment, what is beneficial and viable as against what is popular. So for instance, tailoring for women is just the stereotype. But in many poor communities, they don't have customers. So they're given a sewing machine they can't do, they don't have. So we have all kinds of things coming out, traditional medicine, how we can do moringa in powder and all of that, creating niches for themselves, you know. Then we do sports because that teaches life skills, and we have support from UNODC. We do the skills entrepreneurship from the National Board for Technical Education, ITF. We do paralegal training because there's a lot of SGBV that happens in the communities, and the children are up the creek without a paddle because they don't know cultural issues. All things come in and the child can't access justice. We do security awareness for the young people so they're able to nip communal conflicts and not carrying arms, but knowing where to report when these things start. We do digital skills. You know, there's so many things, renewable energy, waste to wealth. We take partners from federal and development partners and the state government. We train them across these different skills for 3 weeks, and then we assign 50 children each to them because it's beyond enrollment. They enroll and they drop out. You understand? So we're trying to make them mentors for these children. And so they have a responsibility every month, after seeking parental consent or the guardian's consent, to work with these children. The state sets up interim community hubs, and then training goes on for about 6 to 9 months, depending on what the skill is. They now learn. I mean, if the child doesn't turn up, you have a responsibility to go to the child's home and find out why. And every month you report back on those children that are under your custody, right? And that is the information that sort of lets us know that you're working, and then we pay you 30,000 naira, which is minimum wage, from Abuja directly to your account. And then beyond the 9 months, which is the maximum training period, you have a responsibility to put the children back into school. So you negotiate with the parents, and you also ensure that they enroll and they remain in school. If they don't remain in school, you need to give us the reasons why. This is why we've moved to the National Bureau of Statistics, because they are able to analyze the trends. And we're looking, we have a budget line for consultants who will now, if it's security issues, for instance, send it to the NSA's office or to the security advisor in the state. These are the reasons why children are not going to school. And
how many children would you say have been trained so far?
The youth facilitators is what we call them. Almost 5,000. 5,000
youth facilitators.
Yes, we're in 8 states.
The children in their hubs.
The children, so each one has 50 children.
50 children, so yes. Just multiply that by 50.
Yes, by 50.
Okay, let's quickly take this conversation now to Lagos. I know Bukola has questions for you.
Yes, thank you, Malkwe. Mrs. Uwais, you've touched briefly on, the subject I'm headed for, but I just want to put it in proper context now. Just days ago, the FCTA authority had cause to send back about 217 destitutes, I believe, to Katsina State and other states. And this pretty much supports the trend of, migration from the north down south. And so when you see out-of-school children in the southern part of the country, you know that, by merely looking at them, that they're not indigenous to that particular area, that they're coming from the north. So, and this swells the numbers of out-of-school children in the south as well. And we wonder if, as a result of this trend, government and agencies like yours are just treating the symptoms rather than the root cause of, the numbers of out-of-school children, which is the Alamajiri system. Don't you think that northern leaders should, as a result, sit down and have an honest conversation about this, particular, religious factor that fuels the numbers of out-of-school children across the country?
Well, it's interesting that they're moving to the south, because this is not about knowledge. This is about skills. This is about learning trades now, and I would say that it is a responsibility for Nigerians and especially the federal government and the state governments, not necessarily northern leaders, because these children can move anywhere and live anywhere and, become productive or become dangerous, depending on where in Nigeria. I think we should stop thinking of it as being a particular, it's the problem of a particular region, because we don't have any borders that actually stop you from moving from one place to the other. But it's important for us to acknowledge that government has to work with the states, and the states have to lead. The states have the mandate under the Constitution on primary health care, on primary education. Mental health for me is critical, but we keep talking about education. Education is important, but we also need to look at the way these children are being traumatized or have been traumatized and how they can actually disrupt issues. Anything that you start that's legitimate. So I feel what the government can do, the federal government can do, is coordinate, share learnings, ensure standards are there, and then, of course, get the states to sit up. We've left it to the states all this time. I've heard people saying, there was last week, there was a Almajiri Commission hearing, and people were saying another agency, and by the way, I'm not an agency. I work with the vice president. He's the one actually driving this. The agencies, there are many, they can be repealed, and we all know how they can become huge and not a lot of the funding goes to the wrong, but we just need to do something. The federal government cannot continue to close its eyes to what UNESCO says. UNESCO is the highest number. It's 20 million, right? We can't close our eyes to it. It's Nigerian children. It's not just the states. So I think we all need to stop saying it's somebody else's responsibility.
But
I think
really,
it's our responsibility. Even outside government, I would continue to apply myself in this, because to this problem, because it is a huge problem, and these children are entitled as Nigerians to a future that is prosperous.
But really, do you think any significant progress can be achieved without some form of regional approach to this problem through a social investment program, social security, attitudinal change to the problem of child marriage, for instance, at the sub-regional, at the subnational level, if governors come together?
Can't happen.
Okay, I'll take that again.
I lost you there. I agree that people who, I heard you say something about regional, right?
Yes.
People who understand the challenge need to work there, and I am from the north, I'm working there, but I'm not saying that, what I don't like is the idea of us saying it's somebody else's fault. There is no regional construct that can take on this. The states are recognized by the Constitution. So the states have a responsibility. Subnationals have the responsibility to do this work. Children, women, all those issues, human capital indices are at state level. But to say a region should take what region, I know we say there's a northern region and a northern, but what's the construct? Who is in charge there? What's the governance platform there? How do we engage with the region? I think we need to place the responsibility on the states and get the states to align with what the federal government is offering. I made a presentation to NEC. The vice president, as chairman of NEC, the National Economic Council, asked me to speak to all the governors, and I did. So far, only 9 have asked me to come in and work with them. And interestingly, it is not just where the states are. The numbers are high. 2 southwest states. One of them has 92% children in school. But they're more concerned about the youth that drop out. The same thing, one of the eastern states, they have a lot of restless youth, and they want us to to offer their youth a lifeline, skills in an organized manner. And we're there. So it's not a matter of just Almajiri. It's a matter of what we see and how we can make this huge population productive. irrespective of whether they have degrees or secondary school education or whether or not they're ready to embrace the skills. And you find out, you have these mentors in the community. If an Ibrahim, for instance, has shown as he's growing that he loves animals, the mentor can actually guide that child into animal husbandry, or because some of them tell you straight that I'm not interested in going to school. If you meet a child or youth at 16 or 17, what am I going back to school for?
Let me just come in quickly as we begin to wind down on this conversation. It's a very important one, really. It doesn't just concern our present situation as a nation, but our future as well. And I hope that the conversation is also trickling down to the local governments, because there's the LGEA, the UBEC, SUBEB, and all of that. But for the local governments, they have a major role to play in primary education, at least. And I don't know how much work is being done in that area. But please speak to this fact. What figure are you working with, the number of out-of-school children? Because I think the conversation started with that, what I said, disparity in the figures. So what are you working with, and why do we seem to have different figures of out-of-school children?
Oh, every organization has its own methodology for coming up with out-of-school children. I've been working with the UBEC, the commission, UBEC, and they've been supporting us on primary education. They've actually paid for some of the training that goes on. It's a very huge problem, and it's not something, as I said, that we can point at an impact in a day or two or even in a year. We've been working for 2 years, and we're very happy with what we see is unfolding. Now, to your question, what was it that he really wanted? Because this is not really working. Yeah, what was his question?
Kaide, can you come back in? Because
in Neota, thank you. I'm asking specifically.
Go ahead, Kaide.
There's a disparity, there are different figures depending on who you ask. So what figure are you working with in some of the interventions that you've come up with? What particular figure? Is it 10 million, 12 million, 20 million?
As I have said earlier, the numbers differ. They vary depending on which organization. And we're working with UNICEF, UNODC, and UBEC. Everybody has their figures. What we have decided to do is work with the communities and take 50 times 50. So we have 50 youth in every local government that are assigned 50 children for a period of 9 months, and then another 50 come in. So we're growing the numbers from there, and it's we're in 9 states, 6 of which are in the north: Borno, Gombe, Sokoto, Kaduna, Nasarawa, and Niger. And so these are if you count the number of local governments, I don't have my laptop in front of me and I'm not that young, the 50 per local government, male and female, and then 50 times 50. These are the numbers. I don't think, it would be very, very ambitious to say we're going to do 4 million or 5 million or 10 million. It's even going to set me back in terms of my own motivation or the motivation of our team. But what we want to do is to incrementally change the trajectory. And this is what we're working at.
So looking at the numbers, the numbers you've called out, 2,000, about 2,500,000, that's what you have right now. If you're looking at 500 youth mentors, and then 5,000 youth mentors, and each of them has 50 attached to them. You're talking about 50, you have about 2.5 million children that you're already dealing with at the moment, and you want to increase that number.
Yes, after 9 months, they move back, and then we take on another.
As we wind down here, let's look at what the political will is like in terms of support for these, because you're looking at these children, the vulnerable ones, who more or less have
no voice.
So what's the political support like in this state?
Well, there's a transition committee in. But what we're trying to do right now is to ensure that this is sustained, because we've already started paying the youth facilitators. We've started getting the feedback, and it's very interesting. So we're working with an NGO to see how we can have a public-private partnership, because even the development partners are interested and they want to fund the NGO rather than government, right? So we will have a budget that is right now in NBS. We don't handle money. NBS handles all our procurement and our payments, our disbursements, everything, the accounting, the National Bureau of Statistics, because that's where the analysis goes. But we're trying to ensure that for sustainability, we have this NGO, and then we have a public-private partnership, so that is sustainable beyond this. But at the end of the day, when we make a presentation to the transition committee, we will explain to them what's going. The decision is theirs, really. If we show them the numbers and the impact, it's up to them to decide whether to go this route or another route.
One would wonder, again, the sustainability of this program, because the government's winding down, the next government's coming, as you said, the transition committees are there. Is there a legal backing to ensure that this kind of a thing, this reach to these voiceless children, so that these numbers do not continue to go out there?
I just mentioned the Al-Majri Commission.
Yeah.
They seem interested in what we're doing. But all of this, for now, is in a phase where it's very fluid. We're trying to structure this to ensure that there is sustainability. I don't want to make any claims that are not firm yet. But these are the discussions that are going on now. And I'm hoping that they will see that this is important. Beyond enrollment, there's a need for mentorship, and there's a need for mental health, and there's a need for all of this, so that even the youth have something to do, and they get jobs and we open up their opportunities too.
Well, we hope that we're able to speak with you again sometime soon, and we hope that the figures, maybe perhaps by the end of this year, will, reflect some of the work that, you have been doing. We have to thank you so much for coming on this morning. Miriam Uwais, a special advisor to the President on Social Investment, and is a national lead at Risk Children Program, ARC-P. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to.